Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Legal Lunch Byte. I am so excited today to welcome my good friend, Elena Pintea-Pushkin from Paris, France. She is an M&A lawyer, and I'm going to let Elena introduce herself and her practice a little more. We're going to talk today about the business environment in France, what Elena has been seeing, and anything else that comes up in the conversation. So, Elena, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. So my name is Elena Pintea-Pushkin. I'm an M&A lawyer based in France, in Paris. I specialize in mergers and acquisitions, working primarily with clients in industrial sector, real estate, and medical sector, but I have no specific area of work. I have had the opportunity to work on variety of cross-border transactions, and also assist clients with the regulatory matters, especially when navigating the French regulations. I work in a French law firm called 𝗓𝗏, which is a full-service business law firm. My work often involves working closely with foreign businesses seeking to invest or to expand in France. So I'm familiar with the challenges and the opportunities that they may encounter.
Excellent. So great. So, Elena, how is the current business environment in France? Would you say that it is trending up? Is it holding steady? Are you in a downturn? What is the feeling right now on the streets in the business world there?
I think I can say that the business environment in France is good for many reasons. First of all, the economy is stable. The governance seems to be stable too now. We have the strong legal system that helps to operate the businesses safely. There are a lot of industries like cars, airplanes, luxury goods, and technology. The government supports new ideas and green practices, which I can say encourage companies to innovate. France is also very well located in Europe, so it can be easily for businesses from outside the Europe to invest in Europe through the subsidiary or the main office in France. There are some challenges also, for example, like employment regulatory, which is very known to be a hard one for foreign companies. Actually, it's what we hear very often from other lawyers, that when they start to buy a business in France, the first impression they have that the employment regulations are very protective for employees. So sometimes we have to respect some procedures before acquiring a company. And I understand that these regulations are not so strong in other countries, even in other countries in Europe. So this is the point that we discussed the most at the beginning of all acquisitions.
That's really interesting. Can I ask you a little more about that? I'm curious because the U.S. is depending on the states where you're practicing, the U.S. is very employer friendly. So can you give some examples of things or even advice that you give to your foreign clients when they're coming into France and saying, okay, let me prepare you for what is the normal here in France and kind of how to navigate that? I'd be very interested to hear more about that.
Yeah, for example, is some rules before acquiring a company. If a company acquires more than a control of another company in France, even if it's a French buyer or a foreign buyer, if we acquire more than 51% of a company, we have the obligation before signing any SPA or any other engagement letter or document, we need to ask if there are less than a specific amount of employees, we need to ask each employer if he wants to buy the company or not. And this is very strange because
Wow.
actually, yes, and it can seem to be very strange, but actually it's not very dangerous, because even if we have an employee who says that he wants to buy the company, the seller is not forced to sell to him. so it's
Interesting. Okay.
absolutely it's not very useful. and each employee can renounce to its right to buy a company. But sometimes there are some employees that do not want to sign a document renouncing to this right, and we need to wait 2 months, because we need to inform them 2 months in advance before signing the SPA. Sometimes this period of 2 months is not taken into consideration by the foreign investors or by the foreign buyers, and that can have some problems. Of course, there are some other legal documents we can prepare to be not very binding, but still a little bit binding for this 2 months period. But it's still something to bear in mind when acquiring a company in France. And if there are more than 11 employees in the company, we have this employment council, which need to be consulted also. And normally takes 1 month, but sometimes they can ask some questions and even appoint an expert. And at the end of this procedure, again, even if they are against the acquisition, it does not prevent the buyer to sell the company, but it just takes some time.
Interesting. So it's a lot of consultation to keep the employees involved, but ultimately the seller still gets to decide how to move forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, interesting. So let's turn a little bit to your particular practice area. What are some of you mentioned a few of the industries that you are an expert in. What are some of the types of transactions that you might be involved in or be able to help companies with who are, do you do both inbound work to France and outbound work?
Yes, my work involves advising clients through every step of the acquisition, starting from due diligence, negotiating process, acquisition, the closing. A large part of my practice deals with the regulatory issues, especially in medical sector, when we acquire some medical practices or facilities. The regulations is very protective in this field. I also assist clients in setting up the joint ventures, where for example, in specific areas, the investors cannot buy the control of the companies because maybe, there are some restrictions to specific protected areas, like military, things like this. So sometimes we advise our clients in joint ventures, and it's simply to create a joint venture to acquire a control of the company. And recently I worked in the medical sector. I worked in mergers and acquisitions involving radiologists and radiotherapists. But also, I'm currently working on a deal, and I have been working for this for a year now, because it's very complicated in industrial sector, related to reuse of car batteries, particularly focusing on car industry's shift toward sustainability and battery recycling, which is a growing area in France. So this is very, it's a domestic deal, but still we have some foreign investors which may enter in capital. So everything is in English, and sometimes we need to negotiate the documents that we have already, documents which have been already negotiated between French partners, and we need to renegotiate them with foreign partners. And it's where we see the difference in the mentalities sometimes. I don't know if in your practice you have already been involved in negotiations with French companies, but in my experience, sometimes people can be a little bit surprised by the manner we negotiate. For example,
I haven't yet. So yeah, tell me more about that, because I'm very interested in hearing what it's like negotiating with French companies and French lawyers as well.
I think it depends on lawyers and companies and so on. But what I heard from our partners is that we have a little bit too much formalities. For example, once we had a negotiation of a SPA with a German company, and they came from Germany to Paris to negotiate with us, and we were 3 lawyers and 4 people from the seller. And actually, the meeting was during 4 hours. And at the end of the meeting, our client said that, okay, we noted your points and we will get to you later because we need to discuss with our the person who decides. And they were a little bit shocked because they came, actually, all the principals of their company came to negotiate. They came from Germany. So for them, that was the meeting where they wanted to decide and to close the points. And at the end, when they understand that there is someone more to ask, so they were a little bit surprised. And that's something that we can see often, especially with the listed companies or with big French companies, where there are several layers of people who take the decisions. So, and these people are not always in the meeting room.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, and another point maybe that lawyers have, actually, in my experience, for example, when we negotiated with a company based in the UK, there were the principal who were negotiating with the lawyers, but on other side, our clients preferred us to negotiate. And then we made some points, actually some meetings between us. Then we came back to the meeting room, and that was a little bit surprised because on the other side, there were the principals who were negotiating and not their lawyers. But the practice maybe in France is that the people do not like, and especially when, for example, we negotiate a management package or things like this, the shareholders do not want to enter in this discussion about money, about some point that may hurt someone with the person with whom they will work later. So that's why the role of the lawyer, in my opinion, is more active than, for example, in my experience with a company based in the UK.
That's very interesting. I would say US is very similar too. Maybe it's because lawyers are so expensive in the US and no one wants to pay the lawyer extra time. And so, and I often tell in my practice, I'll tell my client there are certain legal things that I'll want to negotiate, but all the business terms that I prefer to have you negotiate those because you're the one with the relationship with the buyer or the seller. And so I think they're even through dealing with hard things in the business, the preference is to keep that to keep the face-to-face interaction among the people who will be working together after the closing. That's very interesting. So we just have a couple of minutes left. Let's talk about opportunities. Where do you see opportunities in in the French business world? What are some of the hot industries that France is doing very well, where other companies may want to think about France as a starting point to get to the EU, maybe, or anything else?
I think in tech, this is really the sector which is very growing, and there are a lot of deals currently in this sector. Life science, that is very popular today. There are a lot of acquisitions. There are a lot of French startups which are very popular, and I know that there are some foreign investors who wanted to buy them. And maybe it's also because the regulations of this sector is very strict in France. So it's very difficult actually to buy a company in life science sector, and especially if it is related to a hospital or some medical services, because there are some rules. Investors cannot buy a specific, cannot buy more than 25% in some type of companies, because actually the medical sectors must remain independent. And it is considered that if there are investor who has more than 25% of the share capital or voting rights, he may influence the medical practice. So these are two main sectors, I would say. Also, maybe which one? Maybe something with real estate is definitely not the one that I would mention. Maybe car sectors also, with all these regulations, green regulations actually, to pass to green fuels and things like this.
That's great. That's great. I think we're at our time. It's been very fun to catch up with you. It's been probably at least 6 months since we talked. So really appreciate the opportunity to check in with you and look forward to catching up with you again in the future.
Thank you very much, Anton.